path of danger. Everyone he meets, he stays a stranger. Read every move he makes.
Hey, how's it going, everyone?
He takes.
We got Gregory Junkbond Carpenter here. We got Suzanne Sherman sitting up in the peanut gallery. And we got Jeff Johnson, Jumpin' Jeff Johnson, Mr. Producer, doing producing this morning. You've tuned into The Spy Who Loves Liberty. This is the Cerberus Radio Network, and boy, have we got a show for you today. Suzanne, if you would help me out with that big, long, exhaustive list of things that you say that are pretty important for our listeners to, I would say, be aware of so they know how to listen to us in many great and wonderful and dynamic ways.
Do you promise not to fall asleep and start snoring?
Again?
Again, yes. Well, good morning. I'm delighted that you're here today. And as pursuant to Junkbond's request, please consider following us on Facebook. Can't follow me. I'm back in the gulag, 30 more days in the hole for this girl.
Hey, I saw that, by the way. It just isn't on the side. I'm trying to figure out, these people are talking about, like, Suzanne's been caught by the Facebook Nazis again, blah, blah, blah. So I tried to post a picture of little Marky Z there with the Hitler mustache and stuff like that. And there's a metadata tag in there that doesn't let me post that on Facebook.
Imagine that.
I kind of giggled to myself a little bit, he. So then I went and I have like a swastika style thing with the big F's for Facebook. And that didn't work either. I was so upset. I was very sad.
And I'm going to jump in here because I'm the one that made the post that referenced them, and I'm surprised that Cerberus Facebook's page has not been banished at this point, because I called it the Facebook SS.
Oh, and you're going down, pal.
Suzanne and I were just talking this before the show, and I'm sorry, we really did. We're interrupting Suzanne's intro here, but we were talking that we really are facing an uphill battle against these tech giants. You were having trouble. Well, that's why we're late again this morning, folks. The tech giants. Greg was having difficulty getting the links in the technology that is available to us. So we're fighting a battle here, and the Marxists are winning.
You know,
so it's interesting because hold on, lawyer.
Fine.
Lawyer's got to wait just for a second, okay?
I wear the red paper hat.
I got the pointy one. So it's interesting. So after I tried to make that post, and I'll tell you, I don't make a lot of posts like that. I do make some strong comments, but I've never put up a picture of Bismarcky Z there with a Adolf Hitler type mustache and stuff like that. But after I tried to post that, my inbox is flooded. And I thought this was extremely interesting. I'm going to try some other experiments later on. But I was flooded. I was inundated with spam emails. And then on top of that, I was inundated with attachments with malicious links in them. Dozens and dozens and dozens. I'm thinking, my goodness. Is this a automated response that Facebook has put together to respond to people who violate their community standards rules? I thought that was fascinating. So I'm looking at some of these documents that they've sent me and some of the malicious emails that they've been sending me. So, and that's the other reason that I've been having an issue this morning, Jeff, is the system that I use is a virtual system embedded into my other system. And my virtual system kept crashing and crashing. I mean, it was amazing how many viruses that if I had been on my actual system, they'd own my system through and through. And I'd have to actually wipe the operating system and reinstall everything on there because I couldn't even count the number of viruses and malicious links that were being set up to activate things like rats. A rat is a remote access tool. They could control my computer. They could turn my camera on, all that other stuff. And it only started after I tried to post the picture of Bismarcky Z.
That is crazy. You know, let me get the houseworking done and then we're going to get back to this. So, our little housekeeping here, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. I think this really underscores the need we have to come up with an independent website as well. And we can direct people there and have conversations there as well. But for now, if you do miss our shows live, we have our archived for the English speakers episodes on SoundCloud. Also named Cerberus Radio Network. Also the same thing with YouTube. I believe if you're in YouTube right now watching live, we have a live chat option available. And even when I am on the air and I am in the Facebook Slammer, Facebook Zuckerberg Correctional Facility, I can read messages. So I can read them and I will answer them on the air. So we have our Radio Co app as well, and that plays content 24/7. You can hear these great episodes called Liberty Minutes, one of Junk Bond's projects, which are outstanding. The Spy Who Loves Liberty, the Wasatch Report, past episodes of the Mark and Suzanne Show. We really got to get Mark's headset back on. Some of the Gold Standard. I have an episode with Adam Mosley from the Gold Standard. So check out our programming there. There's a lot of stuff that I'm sure will appeal to you. We have some new talent coming on board that's in the works, and a lot of fun stuff. But we're up against the wall with these tech giants here. My friend Paul Jensen, who's been hosting the Inside the News show on K-Talk Media out here in the Sandy, Utah area, he actually closed all his accounts. He had one spare, and that's how I was keeping with him, in touch with him. He was not able to get his advertisements out, shadow banning. And I think what happened with my account was my regular public account that just gets hammered with the responses. It's a very busy page. I got a notification last night that this post violated community standards. It was an 8-year-old, wasn't even a post. It was a comment that I had posted somewhere, and it was about people taking over America, and because of America's asinine policies, they're going to be successful. And then I used the word muzzies because we have a big Muslim population in California, and they were putting a community center in contravention to all the zoning ordinances. And, you know, you see words that are a lot worse than that out there. I, in fact, get called them all the time on Facebook, and nobody seems to care. I don't go running to the Facebook authorities, but Junk Bond, I think we were saying that they have an algorithm, and I think this is even more than an algorithm, because you mentioned the metadata before, the metadata tag.
Right.
A while back, my pictures, I couldn't access my pictures, but before the pictures came up, when I would click them, once they started popping up, I would get these metadata tags, and they said trees, nature, wildlife. Do you think maybe they have gun as a metadata tag?
Excellent question. I wouldn't doubt that at all, or any variant thereof. See, when you do folks, for example, when you do like a Google search or something along those lines, you invoke the activation for these metadata tags. They don't, these search engines don't search through the whole document. That's not what they do. Inside of the metadata, or the data that talks about what's in the document or talks about what's in the audio file, there's tags that will say gun, Second Amendment, rifle, pistol, Smith & Wesson, S&W, S&W. There's all these different variants that are put into the metadata, the data about the data. So when you do that search, when you actively are looking for something, this is how it collects the documents. This is how it collects these websites. It doesn't scan the whole website looking for words that match. It scans the header information, or it's a better way to put it. It's like the introduction of a book. right? There's a little bit about every part of the book in the introduction. Well, that's what the metadata is. It's a little bit about everything that's in that document that'll make that document come to the top of your Google search. Because most people are using Google. I'm using Google as an example. Uh, but if you're not using DuckDuckGo for anonymous searching, you're, I would say you're wrong. You should be using anything that makes you more anonymous. The Google search will always come up with the highest percentage of hits. So if there's 20 or 30 meta tags in one document and there's only 3 or 4 in the other, then the one with 30 will be the first one that's returned to you. Now, what are they tagging? That's a good question. Whatever the Facebook community standards are in that 17,000 page document that you were given so you won't read it, that's what they're keying on. And that's really how they control you. It's a manipulative tool to ensure that you actually don't go through and read what the community standards really are, so that they can control a larger group of people like that. It's pretty, I'd say it's a pretty benevolent move on their part, but a lot of places have those extremely long disclaimers, don't they, Suzanne?
Oh, they do. Does anybody even read the terms before you accept these new apps or when you sign on to Facebook? And
Well,
and
that's the idea. That's the
yeah,
idea, is to make it so long that you don't read it.
and even if we know what the conditions are, we know that they can spy, we know that they can access our contacts, our camera, our microphone at will, and we still sign on. We've become so accepting into this. Well, it's worth the convenience to sell our souls, literally, because they've got us now. I was talking to Jeff last night. Sometimes I just want to unplug from all this, but I met wonderful friends like you two thanks to this medium. You got to ask yourself too, if you go to a restaurant or a club or somewhere where they continue to spit in your food, throw your food at you, kick your chair out from under you. They obviously don't want you, but you keep coming back. Why do we do that? Because we don't have a reasonable alternative.
Yeah, I understand that completely. So, hey, why don't we make our own social media platform?
Well, haven't we tried? We have Gab, we have MeWe. I think the kids are using Snapchat. Even my kids hardly use Facebook.
Oh, Snapchat. Oh.
Doesn't Facebook own Snapchat too?
Yeah, I think they do. But Snapchat is in a direct contract to make a database of all images.
Yeah, you put those little filters on your face. You think you're being cute. You're just giving them everything they need.
Right. They're going to be able to identify you over time.
Mm-hmm.
Now think about that for a minute.
Well, now look at the 10 years ago and now update that was going around that everybody was participating in on Facebook.
Really? I didn't see that. I don't subscribe to that.
Yeah, you saw that.
Well,
I don't remember that. That's horrible though.
As you, Greg, I never even responded to that. I right away recognized, I saw the danger right away. You've been educating me.
Right. And so I did see something that, I mean, it speaks to the problem that we're looking at. One of my friends had posted something with, oh goodness, that psycho congresswoman, AOC.
Which one?
Well, it didn't have any verbiage of her talking, which was it was music to my ears. It did have a picture of her at some party with some guy behind her holding her off the ground and her holding her legs up, like she was doing a split, but she was holding her legs up with her lower section like right at the camera.
How attractive.
And I'm thinking, yeah, well, I was thinking in my own personal mind here for a second, like, that's somebody's congresswoman. That's wow. How cool is that? I mean, remember that old Monty Python skit? Your wife, is she a goer? You know what I mean? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Say no more, Squire. I, I'm having this Monty Python flashback in my head. I
Very great.
dumped the I dumped it real fast. I was like, that is the most horrible thing to have pop up on my screen. I don't need this garbage on my computer. I have a very good system set up here that I can filter out garbage. So I've added into my system here uh, all of the pictures of AOC. So anytime her face pops up in something, it's going to be denied by my system. So don't send me pictures of this individual. I'm not going to see them because I have chosen to remove this person from my consciousness and my train of thought for most days because that person is not my Congress thing.
It's
That's
gonna be
not my
interesting
rep.
to see if you can filter her out once she becomes president. God help us.
So
Hopefully,
I'm going back to the theme of the show today.
in Honduras by then. We kind of switch roles, don't they? Come here, we go there.
I'm sitting here thinking, like, you guys want this?
No.
Because I know of a way to help make where you're at better, but here we've lost.
Right.
You don't have as much money going in down there, and we might be able to have a little bit of say in what happens. Up here, too much money. So back to the theme of the show today. I thought we would. we're gonna do. You like that transition, right? We're gonna do
Smooth as paper.
gold and silver and vaults. Oh my!
Ooh.
We're going to talk about gold and silver, and then we're going to talk about a couple things that have fallen out of the National Security Vault on the floor and has been posted in the archives for us, the cows, to consume, chew up, and defecate and fart out into the atmosphere. First thing I wanted to talk about was I just got this post. My cousin up in Connecticut, and if you want to talk about oppression, my goodness, now there's a good place to start. Connecticut is the place to be. This is actually from the Free Thought Project, and it was posted yesterday. It says, state proposes bill to treat gold and silver as money to directly fight Federal Reserve monopoly. Can you imagine that for just a second? Some state is going to try to stand up to the Federal Reserve. I'm not sure how long this is going to continue. It's continued one day so far because the bills haven't been canceled. This is out of Tennessee. It says bills introduced in the Tennessee legislature would define gold and silver. Oh, I don't know this word. SPECIE. Is that a legal term or is that a special word? Species?
Species.
Okay. See that? I learn something every day. Specie as legal tender and eliminate sales taxes levied on it.
Let me interrupt.
Ooh.
Our good friend Sean Hoffine in Arizona actually went to a store to purchase some gold and they tried to tax him on it. He was he was lit up.
The hell they charging him tax for?
Oh yeah. I heard that story. We haven't heard from him in a while. We got to follow up and see what he's up to.
Oh
anyway.
my! Well, I'm going to corner him the next time I'm out at Tucson.
Yeah.
I'll be speaking at the Southwest Cyber Conference again out there soon, and I'm going to set up. I'm setting up down in Tombstone, lady.
I want to go there. When is that? You usually do that in November. Is there one sooner?
Yeah, they sometimes they have one in April or May that they ask me to come out and speak at the University of Arizona.
Well, if they do, I'll get my RV down there because hopefully the snow will have melted off my property. Anyway, carry on.
Very nice. But I usually corral him down there and we jump on and have a good time. And we were on his radio station there, that AM station that he's on before a few times. And we had a blast. his producer was laughing so hard, I thought he was going to have to take 5 just for himself a couple times. When you get Sean and I in the room, it's the gloves come off. Let me put it like that. But anyway, why in the world would you be charged tax on gold? I don't understand how that would happen. I've never paid tax for gold.
It's like asking for change and getting taxed on the change. I mean, are they not both money or currency?
Wow. Interesting. Okay. Passage of these bills would pave the way for Tennessee residents to use gold and silver in everyday transactions. Now, you can use gold in everyday transactions already, and you can use silver in everyday transactions. So it was a little confusing to me. But let me continue. This is a foundational step for the people to undermine the Federal Reserve's monopoly on money. Senator Steve Sutherland, a Republican, introduced Senate Bill 978 on February 6th, and Representative Rick Eldridge introduced House Companion Bill HB 1323 the same day. Titled the Tennessee Legal Tender Act, the legislation would make gold and silver legal tender in the state, meaning it would be recognized as a medium of exchange for payment of debt and taxes. Practically speaking, gold and silver, there's that word again, specie, would be treated, would be treated what? As money, putting it on par with Federal Reserve notes in Tennessee. So at least they have the terminology correctly, that these are Federal Reserve notes. It's not actually money. Folks, you lost your money a long time ago. Specie legal tender would be defined as specie coin issued by the United States government at any time, and 2, any other specie that a court of competent jurisdiction by final and unappealable order rules to be within the state authority to make or designate as legal tender. Lawyer, help me with what the heck did I just say? Is that just saying that if the courts in Tennessee say that this is legal tender, then that's it? I'll read it again one time, then please give me your comment and your thoughts on this. Any other specie that a court of competent jurisdiction, that means they have the authority to rule on it, right?
Yes.
I'm learning this stuff. all the time I stand in front of the judge. I mean, by final and unappealable order, rules to be within the state authority to make or designate as legal tender. What does that mean?
I think it means they could come up with anything they want to be legal tender. Now, the Constitution prohibits the states from coining money, but that looks to me like they could say the coins that exist are already legal, can be legal tender. I've never really given much thought to this, but apart from coining their own money, why can't they? So I guess I really off the cuff answer is I think that the states have the power to use the gold and silver as money. I think it's going to have some feedback negative for them. I mean,
it's definitely going to have negative feedback.
It worked so well for Muammar Gaddafi.
Yep. Hey, Greg.
And Saddam Hussein, yes.
I have a companion article.
You do? Well, let's get them together and see if we can make some money on this.
I did a show back in December about this article, so I had to go back and dig through my pile of prep real fast, and I found it.
Both pages?
It's called "Texas Bullion Depository Begins Construction," and it was
yeah. So I heard you do that. This is
2018.
Jeffrey,
let me read the first 2 paragraphs.
Jeffrey,
yes.
Hold on. So I heard you do this show, and this is what made it come back in my mind, and I was going to ask you to go back and pull that up because I couldn't remember what state it was, but somebody is stockpiling all their gold and silver and stuff like that. They want to make a facility to stockpile all their stuff, and that turns out to be Texas.
Right. Let me just read the first.
Okay.
So it'll give you the whole context of what they did. And this, again, was Mike Meharry, and I gave you the title. Leander, Texas, December 17, 2018. Last week, officials broke ground for construction of the Texas Bullion Depository Building. The creation of the facility represents a power shift away from the federal government and sets the foundation to undermine the Federal Reserve's monopoly on money. In June 2015, Governor Abbott signed legislation creating a state gold, bullion, and precious metal depository. The facility will not only provide a secure place for individuals, businesses, cities, counties, government agencies, and even other countries to store gold and other precious metals. The law also creates a mechanism to facilitate the everyday use of gold and silver in transactions.
I have a question. I have a quick
Going
question.
along with what your story is.
Quick question here. What if there is an executive order requiring that all the specie be turned into the federal government? Will Texas interpose on behalf of their sovereign citizens and say, no, we will not hand this money over to you? That's what scares me about having it in a repository like this. Just like, by the way, some of these gun control advocates say, we want you to store your guns in a government approved gun club, and you can access them there anytime you want. Really?
So, yeah, anytime you want that we say you can.
Right.
I think that's
Almost
the
anytime. Yeah.
that's the fine print. That's the thing that the lawyers do.
I hate lawyers.
I know, right?
Oh, no, there's one lawyer we all love.
Right. So angry. No wonder she got banned from Facebook again.
Evil with a capital R. AOC told me.
With a capital I.
Oh my gosh.
I actually
Okay.
have a funny quick aside for you. Back in the days when I used to race jet skis, we were fueling up, and we had our trailers with us and our boats behind, and a friend of mine saw some motocross guys, and there was a plate on there, where the racers have their number, and then it was like number 35E. And my friend with his big booming voice yells across the parking lot, "Hey, what's the E stand for, idiot?" And I just looked at him. He goes, "Oh my God, idiot starts with an I."
In some languages, yes. In some languages, wow.
Digress. You have permission to completely derail my show, by the way, like I've done yours.
I'm all over it, like like flies on a pile of. Yeah, I could do that too. So, anyway, back to
Pile of Facebook messages. Okay,
Yeah.
we're just cleaning it up for our listeners out there.
man. Oh man, I tell you what. And so, hey, if you're just tuning in, this is the Spy Who Loves Liberty, and I have no idea what's going on right now. I'm your host, Gregory Junkbomb Carpenter. I've got Suzanne, I've got Jeff, and they've completely taken over my show. So I'm going to grab another cup of coffee, and I'll be back at the top of the hour. I won't let you guys get away with this. You're not going to hijack my show completely. Not going to happen. Now, we're talking about gold and silver and gold. Like Yukon Cornelius.
I was just thinking of him.
Back to the article at the Free Thought Project. By allowing the court to designate additional specie to be used as legal tender, Tennessee could free its citizens from potential supply constraints imposed by the use of only U.S. minted gold and silver coin. More importantly, the people of the state of Tennessee would be able to define what specie is considered constitutional tender, further distancing themselves from potential control of their competing currency by Washington, D.C. The bills would also repeal the state sales tax on gold and silver. So it wouldn't forbid the feds from taxing it, but it would remove the state's sales tax on it, which is kind of an interesting thing. I think Tennessee should forbid the Fed to tax gold and silver. Do you think that would ever happen?
No,
If a coalition of states got together?
no, because then a coalition of the black robed messiahs would get together and say, "Oh, that was cute, but we have spoken." And since everybody seems to be completely unaware of the limited role we were supposed to play and how states, we really wanted you to be subservient and we ultimately got our way, you lose.
Yeah, I don't think taxing money is a good idea, right?
Right.
But think about it, folks. Would the feds actually come in and undermine Tennessee and take all the gold? It's not like, I mean, who in their wildest dreams, when would that ever happen in the United States? Oh, my bad. March 9th, 1933. I think that's when the first thing happened. All safe deposit boxes in banks and financial institutions were sealed. Everything. Sales and purchases and movement, including any gold and silver, are prohibited. The possession of a personal safe deposit box that's known to be in your possession could only be opened with an agent of the Internal Revenue Service there to remove the gold from it. How depressing is that? If you've saved money your whole life and you just put a half an eagle here, a quarter eagle in there, and you just drop them in every week or so or something like that, you can actually put some money aside and prepare, right? You could be prepared for that next big crash, the next big problem that happens. Well, here they just robbed everyone's wealth. How much longer, including, and I don't want to leave out the fact that FDR did hike taxes on the lower class during the Depression. Tax rate went up about 25% on the lower class during the Depression.
Let me interject real quick. This behavior was so egregious. You'd think maybe a nice war would have to come along to distract the people. I don't know.
It's amazing, right? And people, after he passed away, and they introduced the bills that limited presidential tenure. People I remember hearing people talk about it in the 80s and 90s. Oh yeah, they don't want what happened to FDR to happen to anybody else. And then you go and you look at the debate. You look at the actual source documents of the debates that happened about this amendment in the states and in the federal Congress, and you can see that nobody wanted FDR like person to ever come about again because of the consolidation of power by the president. They felt that FDR was moving towards communist by implementing numerous different socialist standards and processes into the United States that had never been known before. The New Deal was really a new deal, and it was really to usher in socialism. Socialism was all the rage back in the 20s and 30s, and Calvin Coolidge was able to keep it out. Harding got us through the greatest depression that these United States have ever faced. Go look at the numbers. Yeah, he didn't do anything. He sat there with his cronies and smoked cigars.
There's a book.
He let the natural economic cycle work itself out. Go look at the numbers. The numbers for the Depression of 1920, 1921 were much worse.
Which is why
what FDR had to face. Sorry,
people have never heard of that depression for very good reason. There's a book called Freedom from Fear, and it's written by a member of the Stanford think tank or stink tank. Last name Kennedy is his name. And I did read this book when I was learning and discerning that there were some historians you don't want to follow and some you do. I remember how absolutely harsh his criticism of Coolidge was for not doing anything. And still Coolidge did nothing. The public begged him for assistance. And finally, FDR came in and came to the rescue. This is the garbage that I was taught as an undergrad at UCLA. I took a lot of history courses, political science courses, and they talk about the monopolies and how people suffered. And then we had the Progressive Era and the Sherman Antitrust Act. Well, where is the Sherman Antitrust Act, by the way, with all these tech giants that are squelching freedom of thought and freedom of speech? When they're
I'm
on
sorry.
this,
What did you say? Sherman Antitrust Act?
when
You've got to be kidding me, right?
when the tech giants, the monopolies, these people are on the same side as the government, all of a sudden the government loses its taste. Particularly, again, remember the creepy line, that movie, The Creepy Line, and how the federal government relies on Google. They're not going to go against these people, other than a dog and pony show where they bring Zuckerberg in front of Congress and he makes an ass of himself, and then we have another distraction and everybody moves along.
But we didn't do, I mean, think about it. Even during the heyday of the Sherman Antitrust Act, they didn't do anything except force these companies to reorganize.
Exactly.
That's all they did. They still maintained their monopolies. They didn't lose their monopolies.
The government just got a bigger cut.
Well, yeah. But on the private business side, these guys just had to reorganize and create smaller corporations that were part of a big overall corporation. And if you look at what's happening now, everything's migrating back to the big corporation again. You have it all the time. It's called a consolidation or a merger. Those are the special words we use now. But it does the same thing that it happened back during the Sherman Antitrust days. They just created all those little places, all those little businesses. And do you think Standard Oil went away? No. Not at all. Anyway, I digress. So we have a situation here where we have another state now that is talking about, didn't Utah have a discussion about introducing some type of currency based on precious metals a couple of years ago?
I think Suzanne stepped away.
Oh, okay.
Did.
Well, so much for kicking in a debate at that point. Then we're going to go to the second half of what we're going to talk about. I was looking for her input. If she decides to come back, we'll go back and see if she can answer that question for us. She probably can. On the downside, she probably needs more coffee, which is a bad thing. Never want to be stuck without coffee during the show. So you always I always make sure I have 2 cups set up here, both as full as can be. I'm going to talk about the National Security Council paper 68. Yeah, one of the things I do, one of the things I like to do, is dig through the National Security Archives and look for stuff, because stuff is interesting. And I'm going to read you the highlight of it. It was finally declassified in 1975, but because it was written back in 1950, declassified in 75 during a whole bunch of other strife. If you ever notice, the point is that there are many things that are declassified when we are having times of internal strife. Declassification of important things happens when there is an internal crisis. There's Watergate trial. There's a new president that stepped in that's pardoning other presidents. There's economic issues. That's when you'll see a lot of declassification actions happen. No difference here. Here, the National Security Council had taken and analyzed pretty much world security. And I'm just going to read through this part of it here. This is an extract of it that I have here. It's from the Office of the Historian of the State Department. And it says, National Security Council paper number 68, entitled United States Objectives and Programs for National Security. Oh, pray tell, what could those be? And frequently referred to as NSC 68, was a top secret report completed by the Department of State's policy planning staff on April 7th, 1950. The 58-page memorandum, I don't know too many 58-page memorandums, but that's what they're referring to it here. That's a huge memorandum. Is among the most influential documents composed by the U.S. government during the Cold War and was not declassified until 1975. Now, folks, remember, I mentioned to you that 1975 was a time of strife. That's when it was declassified. It's also the 25-year mandatory declassification time. Top secret documents have to be declassified at 25 years unless there's special exceptions that allow them to stay classified longer.
Why do we allow that? I just got back, by the way. Why do we accept that the findings of the Kennedy assassination are going to be hidden for what, 75 years? Was that it?
There's things that are going to be declassified from that thing forever.
Sorry, I just totally jumped in there. Sorry.
No, that's okay. You're not going to see stuff from the Bobby Kennedy assassination ever released. I've seen, and you've seen me. I read some stuff that made my hair straight, and I'm not at liberty to discuss things. So now you force me into a position to say that being a former National Security Agency employee, everything I say on this show is my own personal thoughts, ideas, has nothing to do with anything that I did or anything that I talk about here. Has nothing to do with any program or anything I did at the National Security Agency. Full disclaimer. Thank you, Suzanne. You're a helper. You're a helper. That's why you're not on Facebook this month.
That's right.
The authors argued that one of the most pressing threat. Oh, you wanted to know about why things are classified for such a long time. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. The bottom line from the National Security Council is that it is to protect national security.
Of course it is.
Did you like that?
I love that.
Okay.
Does that translate to hide our dirty secrets? Our friend Jeff is laughing at me on Facebook, sending me messages for being booted again.
Now, don't be like that. Don't want it.
Right.
People.
When I'm down.
Well, I mean, isn't that the American way?
It is.
Yeah, there you go. So information is kept at 3 different classification levels, right? We have top secret, secret, confidential. Now we have other types of classifications, I would say, more like categories. You have like restricted information. You have official for official use only, unclassified, and compartmented, and things like that. But the 3 classifications of top secret, secret, and confidential, top secret information would cause exceptionally grave damage to national security if it was made public. Secret would cause, quote, serious damage. And confidential would just cause damage. Now, how do you quantify what is exceptionally grave damage, serious damage, and damage? I don't know how you quantify that. I noticed that Robert Hansen, when turning over everything that he knew to the Russians, and yeah, I read the whole lot of what he gave to the Russians. Okay, he gave it to them. Why? Because his supervisor didn't recognize that he was doing a good job, so he got a little upset. And for 50 grand, he sold out pretty much some of the most important programs that we would have. I would say some of the most important programs we had. Now they were all top secret. So how did that affect us? That caused exceptionally grave damage to national security. But that was 20 years ago. And we're still here operating like nothing happened. So is it really exceptionally grave damage, or are we just being overly secret squirreled about everything? That would be the question I have, because realistically, we're all still here. All the information that Aldrich Ames and all the other people that compromised stuff was all exceptionally grave damage, top secret stuff. And we're still here. We're still functioning as dysfunctional as ever. I don't see anything on the back end that would make me have any awareness of exceptionally grave damage to my life or anybody else's life that's out there. So I don't know. I would throw the flag and say that it has more to do with the people who are making the decisions about stuff and how they're trying to manipulate things behind the scenes so they don't get outed, as opposed to a collective of these United States having any type of national security issues because information's been compromised. I think it has more to do with the individuals who are the decision makers who make the plans. Now, do the Russians have spies? Yes. Do the Chinese have spies? Yes. But here's breaking news. It'll probably be on the top. I mean, the bottom, the little scrolling bar on MSNBC, CNN, and Fox is we have spies too. That's right. You heard it today. February 14th, 2019. Junk Bond breaks the news that we have spies that do the same damn thing that everybody else's spies are doing. When we complain about the Russians hacking our elections, did we somehow forget that it's out in public domain now that we have manipulated 85 elections within recent history?
That's what blows my mind, is that we have this across the board indignation over the unsubstantiated allegations, substantiated even, that if it was that Russia interferes with our elections, that's what we do around the world. Flat, round, however you want to see it, that's what we do. Yet we get so upset. Remember when Dr. Ron Paul floated the idea before Congress of treating others the way we want to be treated? In other words, the golden rule. He got booed. That's what our government thinks about respecting other sovereign nations. Heck, they don't even respect their own sovereign states.
That's so true. Isn't that the it's such a sad state of affairs that we kind of look down upon everybody else. But it's interesting because you come back to this article here. Let me look through here just for a second. Where do I want to continue at? Okay, the authors conclude. Let me just finish on here, and you're going to see where this all came from. The authors concluded that the Soviet threat would soon be greatly augmented by the addition of more weapons, including nuclear weapons, to the Soviet arsenal. They argued that the best course of action was to respond in kind with a massive buildup of the U.S. military and its weaponry. Reeling from the recent victory of communist forces in the Chinese Civil War and the successful detonation of an atomic weapon by the Soviet Union, Secretary of State Dean Acheson asked the policy planning staff, led by Paul Neitz, to undertake a comprehensive review of U.S. national security strategy, building upon the conclusions of an earlier National Security Council paper, NSC 20/4, and that's a winner, folks. The authors of NSC 68 based their conclusions on the theory that the decline of the Western European powers and Japan following World War II had left the United States and the Soviet Union as the two dominant powers. Nietzsche's group argued that the Soviet Union was, quote, animated by a new fanatic faith, unquote, antithetical to that of the United States. pardon me, antithetical to that of the United States, and was driven, quote, to impose its absolute authority over the rest of the world, unquote. Furthermore, they concluded that the violent and nonviolent conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union had become endemic. NSC 68 outlined a variety of possible courses of actions, including a return to isolationism, war, continued diplomatic efforts to negotiate with the Soviets, or the rapid buildup of political, economic, and military strength of the free world. This last approach would allow the United States to attain sufficient strength to deter Soviet aggression. In the event that an armed conflict with the Soviet bloc did arise, the United States could then successfully defend its territory and overseas interests. A new word that we use now to help describe imperialistic nations. The authors of NSC 68 rejected a renewal of U.S. isolationism. Isolationism. This is like the fourth show in a row I can't talk. Fearing that this would lead to the Soviet domination of Eurasia and leave the United States marooned on the Western Hemisphere, cut off from the allies and resources it needed to fend off further Soviet encroachments. Folks, if we were cut off from all of our allies and stuff like that, we're cut off from the communists too. Just saying. The report also ruled out that a preventative strike against the Soviet Union because its authors reckoned that such action would not destroy the Soviet military's offensive capacities and would instead invite retaliatory strikes that would devastate Western Europe. Moreover, U.S. experts did not believe that American public opinion would support measures that might lead to a protracted war. NSC 68 did not rule out the prospect of negotiating with the Soviet Union when it suited the objectives of the United States and its allies. However, the report's authors argued that such an approach would only succeed if the United States could create, quote, political and economic conditions in the free world sufficient to deter the Soviet Union from pursuing a military solution to the Cold War rivalry. The study concluded that the only plausible way to deter the Soviet Union was for President Harry Truman to support a massive buildup of both conventional and nuclear arms. More specifically, such a program should seek to protect the United States and its allies from Soviet land and air attacks, maintain lines of communication, and enhance the technical superiority of the United States through an accelerated exploitation of its scientific potential in order to fund the substantial increase in the military spending. This conclusion demanded the report suggested that the government increase taxes. And there is the reason we are where we are. NSC 68 told President Truman, dude, we need more guns. Dude, we got to blow them up more better. That is the bottom line. This study condemned us to a life of excessive taxation, a life of fear of nuclear attack. I mean, I'm old enough. Jeff, you're certainly old. Well, Jeff, you remember, gold confiscation and stuff like that. But I remember
drills, the nuclear drills in school.
Exactly. Yeah, you jump under your desk, right?
Oh, no, we went to the hallway because it's a lot safer there when that mushroom cloud and the fallout hits and everybody's vaporized. Apparently we'll be safer if we leave the classroom. And I remember the tiles against the wall were this porcelain yellow with this white grout. And I remember my back on that cold tile and then sitting on this green tile floor in the hallway and just sitting there and having these drills. And what good they would have done. But I just remember that time. And there were commercials, the public service announcements. I remember that little girl holding a daisy and then the
nuclear bomb. Yep.
Yeah.
I remember the signs, fallout shelter this way.
Yeah, because that was when we were in the height of the Cold War. Never mind, the Russians might nuke us. To this date, I think only one government has used nuclear weapons on a population.
Why you got to be a hater?
Yeah, I know. Why do you hate America? It saved American troops' lives. What I don't understand, we got to do a show just on that because you've got some great background information.
Oh boy, do I have the transcripts of the Japanese Security Council and what they talked about, and what they didn't talk about after the bomb at Hiroshima went off. And let me tell you, Hiroshima didn't even show up, pal.
Yeah, we got to do a show about that.
Oh, absolutely. I do have condemnation for the United States government because, I mean, with all the racism and everything like that that's going on today, why did we blow up the Asians? Right? That doesn't make any sense. I thought we hated everybody else. It doesn't make any sense why we would do that to our friends, the Asians.
Well, the funny thing, too, is when people talk about the Civil War and what a necessary thing it was to do because it benefited all the black people. I said, if you really think the Republican Party was motivated by some sort of benevolence for people of color, please explain what they did to the American Indians once they were through with the people of the Southern societies.
Oh, horrible.
Yeah.
Just horrible. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, I even did a data collection on that too. I have all of the eyewitness accounts of Custer's last stand from all of the Indian chiefs that were there. And
I've been to that field. That was something.
Yeah, he wasn't all he was mounted. He was all cracked up to be.
When we cross over to my show, I'll share my experiences on that when I went to visit there, but I'll let you wrap up. Go ahead.
Oh, we're going to do like Edwards and just do a crossover. This is great.
This is amazing. This is like big time.
I can't believe it. Okay, so we'll have to talk over and cross over into okay, Jeff, I see your notes here. Okay, I got it. Jeff's pinging us here. We got 2 minutes left. We got a minute and a half left. Greg, shut up. We're not going to get to the rest of the vault stuff today because somebody hijacked my show.
We'll cross it over too and do it in mine as well.
More crossovers. I love it.
I look smarter on my show. Wow, she's talking about some heady stuff there.
Oh, good God. See what happens when they throw her in Facebook prison?
Right.
She gets all more smarterer. Well, if that's the case, Jeff, if we're done, anything else you want to throw in today, Jeff, about the nuclear war that we almost had, that we will have one day soon?
Go team.
Oh, yeah, you see now, there's a guy. He's got the jersey and the pom-poms. So for all of us here at the Cerberus Radio Network and the Spy Who Loves Liberty, you got your host, Gregory Junkbond Carpenter, checking out right now, and you all have a great and blessed day.
Cerberus Radio Network, protecting liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. The Wasatch Report, shooting straight on everything from prepping to politics.
Well, greetings, everybody. This is the Wasatch Report. I am Suzanne Sherman. I'll be your host for the next hour here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. Joining me in our studio today is Greg Junkbond Carpenter and Jeff Johnson manning the controls, keeping us live. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. It is February 14th, year of our Lord 2019. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody, on behalf of me and my cats and chickens up here in the hinterlands of Utah, where we are snowed in. We have gotten hammered. Last week, we had the worst snowstorm come through here since 2008, and I was snowed in and dug myself out with my little Ranger and plow. And yesterday I was in really, really good shape. Everything was clear, got my truck out, and then boom, we got hit again. So when we get off the air today, I will be going back at it again. Fun stuff, totally worthwhile. And this is our second live hour of radio greatness this morning. We're delighted that Junk Bond has some time freed up in his schedule. We're able to get a lot more shows on the books. You can follow us at facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. You will not be able to communicate with me directly on Facebook. Well, you can. I just can't respond. I am back in the Facebook correctional facility for 30 days. And I have to say, I'm not a repeat offender. This is an ex post facto sentence. This goes back 8 years to a comment, not even a post. My good friend Paul Jensen over on K-Talk Media out here in the Sandy area of Utah, I go on his show a lot. He recently closed all of his Facebook accounts, opened one more. Now I can communicate with him when we're doing live shows. But he's been shadow banned. I've been shadow banned. My news page, the Suzanne Sherman's Wasatch Report, I've got almost 2,000 people following that. Yeah, okay, I'm not Rush Limbaugh, but boy, howdy, to know that only 2 people have seen my posts. What's up, Facebook? My regular page is hopping, and I think that got their attention because they went back and found a comment that wasn't even bad. It was just politically not in conformance with their values, and I got another Facebook ban. So I'm going to use this time and finish a book I've been writing on preparedness philosophy with my good friend Rick Barrett. And in the meantime, I will be doing more reading and listening as opposed to spouting off and being a keyboard warrior. But while you're on our network here, you can listen to past episodes of Liberty Minutes. We have them on a SoundCloud page. Great, great topics with Greg Junk Bond Carpenter, the Spy Who Loves Liberty host. And the Wasatch Report, we have past episodes of those. Paradigm Shift with one of our founders, Jeff Johnson. Case in point, got another one coming up. Our most recent one was with Dave Benner, historian. We discussed Fletcher v. Peck. Pretty obscure case if you haven't gone to law school. If you're not familiar with that case, go check that out, and it will give you some understanding from where this constitutional experiment went off the rails. And I'll tell you this, it went off the rails even before that case, but that was another nail in our freedom coffin there.
Hey, I want to say something to you about that, because in my high school, this is Greg, folks, just in case you just missed me jumping in here. In my high school, I have to give them credit, because I remember Fletcher versus Peck. That's from like 1808 or 1810 or something like that. And that was when the Supreme Court decided that a state law was unconstitutional.
Yep.
You like it when I remember all these things. Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, separate but equal. Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, 1956, stuff it. I got them all.
Okay, smarty pants, you're going to be one of my guests on one of those shows. We'll pick one of those cases. We'll have
that was one of the things. We were actually forced in our AP history class to sit and read the whole thing. So we had to read the majority decision and what was it called? The dissent or the minority decision? Mm-hmm. Minority or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we have the opinion for the court, we have concurring, we have the dissent, and everybody's got to get their long-winded analysis.
There you go.
All of which is flawed, almost all of which is flawed, by the way. You never hear them saying, oh, this isn't a matter that was delegated to the general government. Accordingly, because this is a state issue, we're going to not hear this at all. No, they never did.
This is the thing that was cool about our high school, is that we had to go back and tie each of these cases back to a constitutional root. We had so much fun with this. Our history teacher probably got blacklisted in the state of New York for doing this, but he made us go back and say, okay, you got Fletcher versus Peck. That's fine. Find me the constitutional authority for the Supreme Court to rule on that.
Yeah, we don't even get that in law school.
That was so exciting.
Yeah, it's just a given now. And I remember law school, sadly, was just a continuation of high school civics, the way the majority of people are taught, where you have your little triangle and your three branches of government at each point, and the arrows going back and forth, and the implication being that they're equally powerful branches of government. Well, clearly, when the Supreme Court speaks, that equality goes away. And when it comes to determining and limiting the parameters of the government's power, they never mention the states. Well, they do in passing when they get to the 10th Amendment, but then they skip over very quickly to the 14th Amendment, which magically applied the entire Bill of Rights to the states, again in direct contravention to our founding principles. But we just don't hear about that. And that's why we're having these problems. And people are just very uncomfortable when you try and interject into a discussion that is really centric to a top-down solution from Washington to the rest of us unwashed masses. And when you try to tell them this was never an issue for Washington, D.C. representatives to legislate upon, and you'll get the really witty laughing emojis, or somebody will get really philosophical and maybe might even, contribute with a meme to challenge you, but you really don't get a lot of discussion. Or if you do, it's the blather that I just repeated, and, that we're taught in high school and law school. Then there's very little difference between the way the two teach. I don't care if you went to a night law school that's unaccredited like I went to, or if you went to Harvard or Yale, they all teach the same thing. We all take the same multi-state bar examination, where if you can choose between the 10th and the 14th Amendments, they say don't even waste your time reading the fact pattern, choose the 14th Amendment because it's always right. If you answer the bar exam in a manner in which conforms with our history and our founding principles, I guarantee you will fail the bar exam. I want to touch on a couple local issues out here. If you wanted to expound upon that while I dig up a couple articles about catching up out here.
Boy, I don't know how to expound on that. That's just insane and ridiculous. If we can't go back to our founding documents and say, okay, this is how we run our shop, then I'm not really sure what the reason or what the purpose would be to have a founding document in the first place.
Well, because
it's completely useless.
The goal for a strong centralized national government, they proffered it and it was rejected outright. We talked about that. The Virginia plan, it was rejected. It wasn't even submitted to the states for ratification. Once the Constitution was ratified, they went ahead, the Hamiltonians and John Marshall. In fact, we're going to do an episode on the Marshall and Hamilton legacy with Dave Benner. He has a whole chapter about that in his book, The Compact of the Republic. So I'm looking forward to having that episode. We're going to try and do that very soon.
That's interesting, because I had just one more little thing here in my meager little non-judiciously minded mind, is that I had a discussion one day with a guy about the concept of how the Constitution is supposed to work and how things are supposed to be, and he said you need to grow up and get a grasp of reality. He said, because and this was funny, he said the anti-federalist won. You can see it right there in the Constitution. Game over, end of discussion. And I was thinking, like, well, gosh, that's pretty doggone. That's like a liberal would do to me. Say, the science has been decided. There's no reason for any further debate on this. And I had to remind him that, okay, I appreciate the fact that the anti-federalists might have won on paper,
right?
But in reality, when Washington stepped in there, those courts were packed with Federalists. Everybody was a Federalist. And from there, it just went downhill, and Marshall lived up to his role of being a Federalist, despite what he said in the Constitutional Conventions.
Hey, look at the state of Oklahoma, which is a overwhelmingly pro-life state. How many babies enjoy the pro-life victory status they have as they're being eviscerated? They're murdered. They're murdered every day. I discovered I have a little bit of Facebook latitude. If I am in a chat, I can actually do the little tiny thumbs up that's connected to attachment. So I gave a thumbs up to that little Facebook Nazi status thing. I wish I could post it. I would try to do it, and I'll try and do it when I when I get released. By the way, I did appeal the decision. The first appeal was rejected. And then I sent another one saying, for crying out loud, this thing's 8 years old. Don't you have bigger fish to fry? I want to share a story because as we know, Prop 2 and then the legislative fix, beg your pardon, was passed out here in the state of Utah. And I reported a week or so ago that the problem is, even though Prop 2 passed and medical marijuana was legal in the state with a lot of restrictions, I did not support this bill. People were being arrested for having medicinal marijuana. So not only were they being arrested, prosecutors, knowing this law had passed, were going forward. One woman went to court without a lawyer. The freaking judge threw the book at her, according to quoting Connor Boyack from the Libertas Institute. He was the mover and shaker behind this. He worked tirelessly to get it passed. The other problem, I said, is the biggest health exchanges out here in the state of Utah were refusing to approve the prescription of medical cannabis. Doctors were saying, I want nothing to do with this. Now, this article I'm going to share with you doesn't address that concern, but remember, the state of Utah is overwhelmingly LDS. There are going to be a lot of doctors that don't want it known in their wards that they're prescribing this stuff. So I think we've got a long way to go. I think it's, I'm not one that likes baby steps, but I see people in Utah think, well, this is a step in the right direction. Those that are against it will say, well, ultimately the end game is recreational use. Well, we have recreational cigarettes. We have recreational alcohol. Treat people like adults. But again, I knew this when I moved to the state of Utah, and I will take my overwhelmingly LDS neighbors and friends over, the freak show I grew up with in San Francisco. This is an article, beg your pardon again, this cold, dry weather. All the plowing I'm doing outside is really doing it.
Wait a minute. You can't get through that fast. Hold on.
What?
You grew up in San Francisco?
Did you not know that?
No, that's never been shared with me.
I know. It's kind of one of my secrets. Yes, I was born in San Francisco, and then I lived there till I was 8 years old, and then we moved down to a community called Los Altos. After the school busing situation, again, speaking of the Supreme Court, thanks to the Supreme Court, I was supposed to be hauled off. My parents bought a home where I could walk to the community school. And then the judicial temple monkeys, the black robe messiahs, set foot and say, oh, you know what? No. Because some black kids felt bad about themselves as a result of some testing with dolls. You're a little white girl. We're going to put her on a bus for 2 hours a day, and she's going to go over to the ghetto for school. And conversely, we're going to take the people from the ghetto, Hunters Point, the worst district, the most dangerous place in San Francisco, and we're going to bring these kids over to your little neighborhood that you paid the money for, you selected your school for, you had this vested property interest, reasons you bought this property, and we're going to throw them out the window. It was an invasion till this day. And I tell you what, we all came there. We're waiting for our new students. And my dad went and talked to the principal, actually, and got it put off for a year. And then it was white flight. These kids came off that bus looking for a fight. This was grammar school, mind you, so 1st through 6th grade. And there were fights. That school became violent. I couldn't go to the restroom because I would get beat up for being a white girl. Fortunately, I was out of there for a while. So after a little bit, but I saw what happened as a result, again, of people implementing these top-down solutions into social policy matters that were never intended to be within the purview of the general government.
So this is good. It actually taught you how to deal with Facebook Nazis.
Right. And then I even we had police presence on campus. And I went to a police officer. I showed him the hand mark on my face. And I said, I just got slapped in the face for trying to use the bathroom. And he did nothing. They stood there. I don't know why they were there. They did nothing. Kind of like the coward of Broward. Well, we got a shooter on site. We're going to hunker down by the car window. So I'll buy our car outside. SWAT outside Columbine. They were out there for 3 hours. So again, I want to address this issue here. It's from the Salt Lake Spittoon is covering it. The state's healthcare giant opens door to writing cannabis recommendations to qualifying, and that's a narrow window there, Utah patients. I repeat my admonition. If you are using this legally, Beware, you will be on a registry. The feds say you cannot have a firearm if you are using medicinal or recreational marijuana in a state where it is legal. So you be careful what you sign on for. Utah's largest health provider has given its physicians the all clear to recommend medical marijuana to qualifying patients, potentially alleviating a bottleneck that had largely stalled the state's new cannabis program. That's something I mentioned, as I said, a couple weeks ago. On Wednesday, Intermountain Healthcare's chief physician executive sent out a memo. Now everybody has the memo to its massive caregiver network, lifting a prior directive that advised physicians not to write letters recommending cannabis treatments. If you, one, have an established relationship with a patient who has the qualifying condition, two, feel that they could benefit from treatment with medical cannabis, and three, are comfortable providing a letter, you can now do so. What did I say a few minutes ago? Many of these doctors, they're part of the community out here in Utah, which is overwhelmingly LDS. So now you might have this established relationship with your doctor. You might have a qualifying condition, but it's still up to the discretion and possibly religious preferences of your physician. Like I said, they must feel you could benefit from the treatment and have to be comfortable with it. They might fear ostracism from their local community. They might personally be against this. So I think you're almost subject to the whim, like you are in California, if you want to get a concealed carry permit. You're subject to the whim of the local law enforcement officer in charge. If you're in unincorporated county, it's the local SO, Chief Lori Smith. In my jurisdiction, unincorporated Santa Clara County had a blanket policy not to issue them. Her discretion.
Suzanne.
Yeah.
What did the federal government require all medical providers do a few years ago?
Store their information electronically.
And who has access to it then?
I do.
Well, we have these HIPAA laws that I think protect us, right?
I have access to it.
The federal government.
Craig has access to it. So here's the problem with this law. Let me get back to the article real quick. Reached Wednesday evening, an Intermountain spokesperson would not comment on the memo and would only say that the system will share more information during a Thursday morning news conference. And then I quote, Connor Boyack said he welcomed the news that Intermountain had changed its stance. Quoting Connor, "We wish that would have been the position on day one when the law was passed. In the grand scheme of things, this is a very quick turnaround for them, and we're ecstatic." The physician letters, going back to the article, not quoting Connor, letters of recommendation are a key part of providing immediate access to cannabis treatments under the state law passed in November. It will take time for the cards to become available and for the pharmacies to open. I anticipate much foot dragging on that one. And initially, the Intermountain had advised its network not to issue the recommendations. There were too many unknown details at this point. In recent weeks, advocates and even former House Speaker Greg Hughes have been pressing the state's medical providers to relax their stance and allow doctors to make the recommendations. Again, the doctors have to be comfortable with this. When I was in California last time, my mom is being ravaged by Parkinson's disease. She is wheelchair bound and can no longer speak or take care of herself at all. Her awareness is minimal. I asked her neurologist, can we please try some cannabis? We have nothing to lose here. Absolutely not. Absolutely, without question, are you not to introduce this to her? We don't know how it's going to react. This is the problem, folks. When you call something a Schedule I drug, one of the criteria is that there's a declaration that a Schedule I drug has absolutely no medicinal value. Therefore, they don't test it. So now, after it's been decriminalized, they're still not going to prescribe it. We've got a long way to go in this area.
Tons of research from Europe and other places around the world that show us the medicinal qualities of cannabis. The line is long, and it goes back to even before it became illegal here in the States in the 30s, because we had research conducted on it in the States here that showed how good it was for people.
And not
This is
for
more
the-
of a personal bias of you know, what their friends will think of them for prescribing something like that. I think more than actually looking at what the medicinal value or of not or taking it would be.
I have an article in my queue here about the history of marijuana prohibition. Again, I wrote an article about it published by the 10th Amendment Center called Parchment and Plants, What Prohibition Can Teach in Drug War. And prohibition, by the way, we can thank for all our firearms laws. The 1934 Firearms Act was a result of the Valentine's Day Massacre, which in turn was a result of prohibition. Prohibition. We need to change this train of thought. I want to change gears really quick now to something else. Actually, it's a pretty clever segue because I just mentioned firearms. And
isn't it my turn to disrupt your show now?
No, you've been doing it since I started.
Yeah.
This is Deseret News, and this is something you guys will want to discuss because this is actually a tragic situation, and I just came across it. It did happen in November, but I want to share it because it just came to my attention. We actually had a target shooter charged in connection with the death of a teenager shot in a passing car. I mean, what are the odds? I'll share the story because now it's just been adjudicated. Salt Lake City, a target shooter who accidentally shot and killed a 14-year-old boy riding in his family's car during a Sunday afternoon drive to look at the fall colors has been charged with a negligent homicide. A gal named Kayleen Richens of Roy, Utah, was charged Monday in the 2nd District Court with a Class A misdemeanor. And again, this goes back to late last year, but this story just came to my attention. I want to just share when we're going to get into little firearm safety issues here, because we've got wide open space out here, and you think you can shoot anywhere? Those bullets travel a long way. So Zachary Kempke of North Ogden was riding with his mother, father, and sister on a dirt road in a remote area of the Monte Cristo Range. That's out here in Utah. The kid was in the back seat, and he was hit in the head and killed. Can you imagine you're taking a country drive with your family, and one of your family members, your children, is shot in the head? The shot was determined to have come from a family that was target shooting several hundred feet away. The defendant and her family were using a paper target on a cardboard box to sight in a hunting rifle. Richens was unaware there was a dirt road on the other side of the dense forest they were in, according to court documents. I really don't like shooting in dense forests. I go out bull elk hunting, and there's a lot of forests there. You guys that follow my hunts know I take long distance shots in wide open areas. Almost 500 yards is not uncommon out here. I get very nervous when I know there are other hunters out there and we're in the thick brush. It makes me very nervous. Anyway, Richens was unaware there was a road on the other side of the dense forest. The prosecutors noted the charges that they did not investigate what was beyond the trees. It was this failure to properly ascertain what was downrange of the target before setting up the target and firing the shot that led to his death, according to the charging documents. As we know, when we teach people about firearms, number one rule, well, I don't know if there's any number one rule, but always keep your finger off the trigger. Never point your gun at something that you do not intend to destroy, and know your target and what's beyond. So, Jeff, you're a shooter. Tell me where they went wrong here.
Well, they didn't know what was beyond where their target was. I mean, that's the number one thing. They should have gone downrange, known what's there, and they should have had a proper backstop.
Yeah, and that's the thing, not having a proper backstop. Even if you think there's nobody out there, those rounds, a flipping 22 can travel for a mile. So this woman is actually now going to be participating in education in an educational video about firearms safety. They're not sentencing her to jail. The mother of the boy thinks like a year would be appropriate. It's a Class A misdemeanor. I'm not going to weigh in. They said that she was absolutely devastated, remorseful, shaking, could barely talk about the incident. Do I think jail time would do anything to punish this woman further? I really don't. Do I think it would be a deterrence to others? I don't think so. I think educating people on firearms and the safety is something that we all need to do anyway. In fact, when I was looking at property to buy out here in Utah before I settled on this one, if this place didn't come through, there was another place I loved. It had a huge wide open field. And of course the realtor, oh yeah, you can shoot out there. And I'm looking at the satellite image and I said, I can shoot across the field, but there are houses all around the perimeter there. So no, I cannot shoot there. I wouldn't even shoot small arms out here. So this house is a no. So I ended up with a place, and Jeff's been here. Downrange, I have a mountain. Got to be careful. You've got to know what's beyond your target. There was a case, I think it was in Alabama, where it was a retired Marine who was sitting on his porch and somebody shot through a sign. You know, people love to shoot out. We love to shoot our signs out in the country here. And it killed the man on his own porch. Combat veteran, survived sitting home peacefully in his retirement and killed by somebody just shooting through a sign. This is how we get gun control, folks.
Would it do any good to put her in jail? Like your question was before. I agree. I don't think that putting somebody in jail after something like that, especially in the condition that she presented after the incident. But I mean, what's the purpose of jail anymore these days?
Right.
Do we punish people or do we rehabilitate? Does she need to be rehabilitated? Because that's all we do. We don't punish people. Because
I would be very surprised if this woman ever picked up a firearm again. Quite honestly.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't know that she'd actually ever go near him again. I think she's so shaken by the tragedy in and of itself. I'm surprised we don't give, like, when people come out of prison anymore. I'm surprised we don't give them, trophies too.
Yeah. I want to share also now. I mentioned Alabama. We have a good friend, Carl Jones. And he shared something that happened to them that night. He said an interesting occurrence for us tonight. So he wrote about it afterwards. I'm going to share this with you. This is and let's play this game. What would we do? Think about this. I've been to Carl's house. We've stayed there when we were on our trip. He's out in a remote country area, and his house is about 100 yards off the road. They've got a long driveway. There are a lot of other houses that are closer to the street as you go to that area. So, in fact, I couldn't find the place. His son had to come out on a four-wheeler and meet us on the road to find the place. But check out this story, keeping in mind how I just set it up for you, the location of their house. He says, I'm laying in bed reading at 1 a.m. Everyone else is asleep when I hear a loud knock at my front door. I grab my .45 and a flashlight. Wyatt, that's his son, meets me in the hallway. I tell him to get the .357 off my nightstand. Now, if there are any snowflakes listening, his son is, I think, 14 years old, very, very competent with multiple types of firearms. Very accomplished skeet shooter and practices with pistols all the time. So I stand in the hallway about 10 feet from the door and yell in a pretty aggressive tone. Now, Carl's about 6'2", big guy, Marine, okay? Who's banging on my door? And I can hear him right now. And a man answers, I need help. A crazy woman put me out on the side of the road. Carl says he's standing up against the small glass window on the side of my door, dressed in a black hat, black jacket, and dark shirt. I can't see his face as his head was down. I shine the flashlight on him and tell him, get your hands where I can see them. He complies. I ask what he wanted. He says that a crazy woman put him out. I tell him to sit down on the steps and I'll call the county to come assist him. He didn't like all my questions or my offer to call the cops and gets mad, saying, never mind, I'm leaving if you're not going to help me. Carl continues and says, He walked down the steps and out into the yard. Now it's a very there's a grass there and a lot of trees, so this guy could have hidden anywhere. I'd shine the light all around the porch and out in the yard and could see nobody else was out there with him. I never should have done this, but I opened the door. The storm door was still closed to get a better look at him as he was leaving. I kept my gun on him. He was an older fellow on a cane, about 67 or so. Was that a cane or was it a weapon? Could be both. That was my interjection there. I told him again to sit down and I'd call the county. He was hurrying off at this point. Oddly, at one point, I noticed he had a cell phone on his belt. I called 911 and they said there was a deputy in the area. I gave a description of him. We called back about 30 minutes later and they still had not found him. Was he really put out or was there a car waiting on him? Was he sent to our door to check and see if anyone was home? How did he just disappear? Like my wife said, why did he choose our house, which is 100 yards off the road and fairly secluded, when there are other ones closer, one all lit up right across the street? Peculiar. I teach all the time that a confident presence and aggressive tone will often discourage a potential conflict. Let's hope that if he was up to no good, he got the message. How wild is that?
That's a one-off.
This
That doesn't happen in New York City, see, because they don't have guns there.
Right. Now, there have been times where there have been notices that some people were escaping police in Carl's community. And I say, boy, howdy. I sure hope they don't make the mistake of trying to show up at your house. Again, I've been to Carl's house. I'm not going to give away any of their PERSEC, but I tell you what, that's probably the worst place in Alabama you could show up if you're a bad guy looking for trouble. So let's pick this apart a little bit. 1 o'clock in the morning, somebody's banging on your door. Could you imagine not having the mindset or the preparedness to cope with this situation?
The first thing I would think of is I need to have my firearm with me, because people don't bang on the door unless, one, they're hurt, they've been shot, or something bad's happening, which means if they've been shot, you should have your firearm, or two, they're up to no good, in which case you should have your firearm. So there's really no question about what you should be going out there with when you're going to address something like this.
I try and share these stories. So anybody that thinks it's inappropriate or dangerous to have a firearm, think about stories like this.
I'll send that to AOC.
Yeah. Well, she's got plenty. We pay for them. She just probably doesn't know how to use them. But here's the thing. Imagine a situation like that where you're not prepared, or you think guns are bad. You don't think that they're safe to have around because we have children in the house. What would you do? How would you handle that situation? There happened to be a deputy in the area, but that's a really remote location.
I don't like that argument either. You know, there's children in the house.
That's why you should have them, so you can protect your
exactly right. That's exactly right. That's a completely counterintuitive argument. Are you concerned that your kids will get a hold of them? I'm not. You know why? Because I taught my kids how to handle them.
Yes.
My kids know what to do when they have a firearm in their stinking hand. They see if it's got the safety on. They make sure that the chamber's empty before somebody hands it to them. I mean, this is just common sense stuff. And if you're going to make an argument of something, at least, please make it a realistic or good argument. Don't hand me that, well, it's because of the kids. Well, if you're not taking the time to do what you should do, then that's your fault that the kids are going to get hurt or something stupid's going to happen. Anything else that you have around the house, for example, a pencil. Well, I don't have any pencils because I never taught my kids how to handle a pencil. And my kid could, stab themselves in the face with a pencil. And I say that because I took a kid to the hospital. I was running I was a EMT on an ambulance crew. I had a kid that put a pencil in his eye. And the reason was he wasn't experimenting or finding out this kid, his parents said that they never kept anything around. They never taught him how to use a crayon, for God's sake. The kid was 2.5 years old.
Yeah.
And he had no idea what he had in his hands. And he stuck the pencil in his eye. Now, thank God they were able to save his eye and his vision's fine and everything like that. But they would not even let him have a crayon because they were scared to death that he was going to eat the crayon. You have to teach children how to do stuff. That's your job as a stinking parent.
This is how we get a population of pajama boys. Interestingly, my younger son, he loved fire. He loves fire. And so we were in California. We had a big concrete area in front of the house. And when it wasn't windy, we had a hose that was right by the garden. He would build little fires on our front area. And he would scream and laugh and have lots of fun. And my neighbor calls and says, "You have a very big problem." This is also a very anti-gun lady as well. In fact, she said, "Well, we should ban guns so we can level the playing field." I said, "Really? So only the criminals have the guns? How level is that?" So that's this woman's mentality. And I said, "Okay, I'm sorry. My son's probably making a lot of noise." Mind you, we're out in an agricultural area, rural residential agricultural. The noise wasn't the problem, but I was trying to downplay it and make it about the noise. And I said, "I'll have him be quiet." She goes, "No, he's playing with fire." And I said, "I know." And we're supervising him, and there's a garden hose right nearby in case it gets out of hand, and it's under control. Would you rather he experiment with fire clandestinely, I don't know, in his closet so we can't see him and my whole house burns down with him in the closet? You got to expose yourself to these kids. We've become so enamored with keeping our kids safe and not challenging them intellectually. I have a really dear friend. I love her to pieces, but the game Candyland?
Mm-hmm.
The horrible cupcake. You draw that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, they boot you back down to the very beginning.
All the way, yeah.
And we called that game Tantrum in a Box because my kid, my younger one, the one that had absolutely no patience for the cupcake, drew it every single time. And I did not take the cupcake out of the box. What did she say she did? "Oh, we just got so tired of it. We just got rid of the cupcake." Your kids need cupcakes. They need to experience the failure. They need to experience setbacks. Conversely, we're completely comfortable putting them in a public school situation where we've seen the abuse that goes on there. Anyway, I'm kind of digressing here, but I
want you to know that Candyland is a gateway game.
It is a gateway game. It gets you eventually to Monopoly, and then you can never leave your house.
Which was created by a socialist, by the way, to show the futility of the capitalist system.
Hence the fiat currency.
Hence the fiat currency, because rule number 11 says you can make as much money in the bank as you want. You can issue it on paper. You can do anything you want, but the bank will never run out of money.
So, but I just thought that this is the difference between somebody that raises their kids and has them in an environment where they are trained and they know what they're doing. And so if you're going to get involved in this whole firearms thing, I'm not ever advocating legislative mandates of training. This is just common sense, folks. That poor kid should never have been hit. And what are the odds of that happening? Mm-hmm. And again, good on Carl and the family. And yeah, he and his son went, but I tell you what, that wife of his just as prepared to defend themselves for. So good on them.
It's actually pretty awesome if you think about it. Because most people these days are more concerned about the person who comes to the door. They're more concerned about hurting their feelings and ending up with a lawsuit because you said something bad or nasty to someone who came to your door looking for help.
Well, and this is why I have such a problem too with these red flag laws. And there's actually an article from FEE, Foundation for Economic Education. And I don't agree with all of their analysis. They're citing 5th and 14th Amendment violations. You know how I feel about
always the 14th Amendment. Yeah.
Always the magical amendment. But,
slices, it dices. Yeah.
If you're talking about federal red flag laws, the ERPO's extreme risk protection orders, that is a violation of the 5th Amendment. But when we're talking about this at the state level, you have to see what your state constitution says. And I do agree that it is a violation of due process. But what did our fearless leaders say? First, we'll take the guns, then we'll worry about due process. No, that doesn't fly. But they'll probably pass it anyway. One of the things they say here is proponents of these laws argue due process is respected by allowing the deprived to appeal to the courts to reinstate their rights. So I guess by that logic, I can be accused of, I don't know, pick a crime. I can be convicted without a trial, but I have due process because I have the right to appeal.
Wait, now I'm not a lawyer, but even that sounds hokey to me.
This backward process would imply that the Second Amendment is a privilege, not a right. Again,
yeah,
crying out loud, this is fee. I like fee. The Second Amendment is neither a right nor a privilege. The Second Amendment, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, please, if you don't get it by now, it is a restriction upon the general government. Antonin Scalia got it wrong in Heller when he wanted to talk about how, here's the guy that says the Constitution says what it says. It doesn't say what it doesn't. Look at the plain text. And he still screws it up 63 pages and still gets wrong one sentence. He says the Second Amendment is a right conferred upon the individual unconnected with service in the militia. What kind of guns does it protect? Handguns. No.
What?
It is this is Scalia. This is the guy everybody's looking to replace when Trump gets, these vacancies. You would think the left would have loved it. People think that Heller was this great vindication for our gun rights. No, because now what it's done was set the stage for banning assault rifles. And we're seeing that. We're seeing federal courts uphold these state bans because Scalia never said they were covered by the Second Amendment. That's the problem with these analysis. And again, I refer people to my article published by the Abbeville Institute, The Problem with Lawyers and the Constitution. I discuss what I refer to, and we discussed this earlier in the show, Junk Bond, the malfeasance of the legal education industry. If you understand and explain the Constitution as ratified, you will fail law school and you will fail the bar exam, and all that effort will be for nothing, but you'll be right.
I think I'm going to throw up a little bit.
They're talking about having these red flag laws in Utah. One of the panels, by the way, out here in our state legislature just had a resolution saying we don't need any more gun laws. This protection we have for citizens under the red flag laws, we already have protections in place for that. These are more feel-good platitudes where, again, the drum of the left in gun control marches forward under the auspices of terms like extreme risk. The extreme risk, in my mind, really is coming from the government at this point. Thoughts, Jeff?
Well, wow, I had so many thoughts, but you guys were just going so well.
Hot spots in Massachusetts.
Sorry about that.
Yep, something about Massachusetts.
Well, this is kind of funny.
Well, it can't be good.
Yeah. So, anyway, yes, we have gotten to the point where these red flag laws, you're being convicted of being a danger without even being present to be given a chance to answer the charges. They're just going to do it. They're going to take your firearms, and this government will sacrifice the lives of policemen and citizens to get what they want ultimately, and that is gun confiscation.
I think it's interesting because you have a situation where people are clamoring. They want security. They seem to be ready, willing, and able to give up any and all freedoms that they at one point had possessed in order to make sure that they're going to be safe. And I don't think that they're actually going to end up with either. If we keep on going down this road, you're going to lose your freedom just as quickly as you're going to lose your safety.
Absolutely. Now, in your show, Junk Bond, we were talking a little bit about FDR and the gold confiscation.
My hero.
Yes. Oh, my gosh. Well, I had a history professor, Robert Dallek. I told you about him. And he would, to me, which I know other professors who are also authors say it's unethical and it's actually prohibited in many universities where they assign their own books for their classes. It's a nice little way to make some money on the side. But here's one.
Big time. Yeah.
I've been meaning to discuss, and we'll wrap this up. We'll wrap up the show with this, that FDR's worst perversion of freedom, the 4 freedoms speech. Remember that?
Oh, God.
With you on me today, I had to do this. Offered citizens no
I was
security
warned about when the Antichrist spoke. Go ahead.
from the state, since it completely ignored the rights guaranteed in the original Bill of Rights that restricted government power. Yes. Okay. Franklin Roosevelt did more than any other modern president to corrupt America's understanding of freedom. I disagree. I think we can credit Lincoln with that one. This month marked the 75th anniversary. Now, again, this came out a little while ago. And by the way, this is by Jim Bovard. I think I used his material more than anyone else. This actually was published. It was reprinted, republished, I think from Mises, but this came out Sunday, January 27th of this year. So what he says here, that his 1944 speech calling for a second Bill of Rights to guarantee economic freedom to Americans. And I've been wanting to talk about this because of our new Green Deal that is looming now. And while it seems kind of crazy now, at some point there will be a vote on it and we will lose. The Nation magazine whooped up the anniversary, proclaiming that Democrats now have a unique and likely fleeting opportunity to deliver where FDL fell short, with vast new government programs, making up freedoms while suppressing others. The speech was finally, and was given as a tide in World War II, was finally turning. What did we say about your show? We sure need a good war to distract the populace from all these egregious behavior that the government was instituting with regards to our gold and other aspects of the economy. That was the era that gave us Wickard v. Filburn, by the way.
My buddies, nothing like a good war to make you turn your head and cough.
Yeah, so the 4 freedoms speech exploited Americans' rising apprehensions toward far more power for the government. Roosevelt promised citizens freedom of speech, freedom of worship, and then, as he was merely enumerating other self-evident rights, the 3rd freedom, look for this under Article 1, Section 8, or maybe the Bill of Rights, or see if we find it in there.
Is that the freedom of barbecue of choice?
Freedom from want. Everywhere in the world. This lays the foundation for these ignoramuses saying that any refugee from every part of this globe has a constitutional right to come here. You can find the genesis in that from good old FDR. The 4th is freedom from fear anywhere in the world.
My favorite.
Proclaiming a goal of freedom from fear meant that government should fill the role in daily life previously filled by God and religion. Well, we've seen that. We know one of the planks of communism, isn't it, to distance us from our faith?
Discredit it.
Yeah, politicians are the biggest fear mongers. We've seen that all the time. We've got the Russian collusion, all that going on right now. Freedom from fear would justify seizing new power in response to every bogus federal alarm. Look at the fear mongering they're doing right now for the extreme risk protection orders. The government's going to protect us from people that we consider to be an extreme risk. Forget due process. If we weigh the two, clearly we want freedom from fear. FDR's list was clearly intended as a replacement set of freedoms, since otherwise there would have been no reason to mention freedom of speech and worship, which were already guaranteed by the First Amendment. The 4 freedoms offered citizens no security from the state. Remember, that's who the founders wanted us to be safe and secure from, the state, since it completely ignored the rights guaranteed in the original Bill of Rights that restricted government power. One of the few journalists that gets it. I love Jim Bovard, including the 2nd Amendment, the 4th Amendment, the 5th and the 6th and the 8th. Roosevelt pretended to magnanimously recognize a right to freedom of speech, but that did not include Zuckerberg. Are you listening? Freedom to dissent. A free nation has a right to expect full cooperation from all groups. The best way of dealing with a few slackers or troublemakers in our midst is to shame them by patriotic example. And if that fails, to use the sovereignty of the government to save government.
I'm sorry, but Hillary told me that I needed to dissent because that's the greatest form of
It's the American
patriotism.
thing to do. Yes, until Obama was in office.
Oh, my bad.
Look at now the behavior at the sporting events. They'll prop up the picture of somebody that was killed in action in some sandbox, third world crap hole. We have no freedoms there. Honor his sacrifice. Stand while we play the national hymn, or the holy cloth will not freedom. Roosevelt sounded like James Madison had simply forgotten the asterisk to the First Amendment about using the sovereignty of government to save government. FDR's new freedom would justify suppressing anyone who balked at the political ruling class's latest goals. There's a related article. I wonder if I can find it here. But there was a politician who was saying that we needed another Kent state.
What?
Yes, he said we needed another Kent state. Let me see if I find. Oh, here it is. And this is a GOP leader. Apologizes for tweeting, "Time for another Kent state." A county Republican leader from Michigan is under fire for seeming to suggest in his social media posts that there should be a Kent state type of crackdown on violent protests like the ones that erupted at a University of California. Kent State. What did they do in Kent State? Now, yes, this article was from 2017, but I found this also because there was another police officer who responded to the criticism from the Houston shootings, and I want to get into the details in that shooting tomorrow, the next time we do a show, saying that they are going to come after the people that are criticizing the police behavior and the no-knock raids and these otherwise warrantless searches as well. They're going to come after people. Remember, we had also a Democrat from California say if American citizens don't want to turn in their guns and they have a civil war over it, well, that'll be short, or we have the nukes. Do you see where we're going with this? Roosevelt, regardless, and I'm going to go back to this article in the time we have left, regardless of his authoritarian overtones, FDR's Four Freedoms doctrine quickly became enshrined by Norman Rockwell in the American political mythology. George H.W. Bush, another one of our favorites, speaking on the anniversary, called FDR, this is a quote, "our greatest American political pragmatist," and praised him for having brilliantly enunciated the 20th century vision of our founding fathers' commitment to individual liberty. Why was this guy never put in a straitjacket? This is insane.
I find it hard to believe that he's still out walking the streets by himself. I find, I'd always thought it was interesting, and we talked about this the other day, is that, Pappy Bush, Prescott Bush, was one of the guys who was involved in the international population meetings, and he attended almost all of them. He was very much into making sure that the population did not exceed food supply, and it was good for everybody else except his family, obviously. And some of the other documents that I have collected from the National Security Archives over time include the Kissinger Memo, and that's what it's called. It's called the Kissinger Memo, an assessment of U.S. national security and how we need to keep a hold of the international population and make sure population stays down. Does this not have anything to do with total control over everybody here and overseas? And what we talked about earlier on my show, US, Russia, we needed to have full military control over Russia. Folks, we started the Cold War. That was our fault. And we're looking at a situation now where the U.S. government is the government of the world, and we are the ones basically who are calling all the shots everywhere. Everybody else kind of plays along or takes a small adversarial position, but it's our government that's calling all the shots. Our government's telling everybody what to do. Our government is the one that's going to get you and me and everybody else killed. It's I don't see a place to go. I don't see a way out of it until there are major changes in Washington. And it's guys like Prescott Bush all those years ago who started looking into this world dominate, or I wouldn't call it world domination. I would say it's a
The world
warm,
police, a global police, our Navy,
yeah,
a global force for good.
yeah. They're supposed to protect us. Now they're a global force for good. What the hell's wrong with us?
But, you know, when Mitt for Brains was running for president and he was interviewed about our interventionism, and the way he said it is, we have got to be in these places before the trouble starts. So we're just going to have United States police stations apparently all over the place. James Bovard really calls out George W. Bush. Baby Bush invoked Roosevelt's For Freedom Proclamation, and what he refers to is Bush's most fraudulent speech, his mission huff and strut across the USS Abraham Lincoln. How appropriate is that?
Oh, yeah.
May of 2003. The second Bill of Rights, 3 years later in 1944, State of the Union address, Roosevelt revealed that the original Bill of Rights had proved inadequate to assure us equality in the pursuit of happiness. These Marxists love their equality. He called for a second Bill of Rights and asserted that true individual freedom can't exist without economic security. Security includes the right to a useful and remunerative job, a decent home, good health, and good education. This really paved the way. And again, what did we get from the FDR era? Social Security. We've got, I'm sure everybody's put into these accounts, which is waiting for them when they die. And if you die and you don't use your Social Security payments, I'm sure that will be transferred over to your estate, correct?
Social Security is a temporary measure, right? I didn't miss out on that.
And it's voluntary.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Voluntary.
Just checking.
Yeah.
I just have one other thing to throw in before we get out of here today. And I'd like to say that according to using a Marxist thought process, take a great man and use his words against him. Quote, "This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism." Martin Luther King Jr.
The tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Wow. Wow, that's pretty amazing. There's a lot more to this article. I think what we'll do is have one of you that still has Facebook privileges posted on our website here. But again, all of this is not about our rights and expanding our rights. It is about government control, total, complete control. Try and find an area of your life that somehow the general government has laid claim to in absolute contravention to our founding principles. Find one, send them to me. You can send them to my Facebook or you can email them to me, Suzanne@Littell.com, Lattel.com. I will respond to your emails and your inquiries. And we're about out of time. On behalf of Greg Jump Bond Carpenter and Jeff Johnson, I want to thank you for joining us today. This has been the Wasatch Report here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.